and welcome to Happy You Asked, the podcast where we explore a little thing called happiness, one awkward conversation at a time. I am Erin Clare, your host, who regularly has in her head the lyrics to the Talking Heads song Once in a Lifetime. You know, how do I work this? Where is that large automobile? Well, how did I get here? That's like my whole life. It feels like that song. I'm honored to be joined today by Dr. Christina Hinton. Christina works at Harvard University's Human Flourishing program, which is cool. I didn't even know they had one until I moved here, where she leads the program's work on education and parenting. At Harvard, she leads research on character skills, loving relationships, and flourishing among children, adolescents, educators, and parents internationally. In addition, she leads the Evidence-Based Parenting for Flourishing Families initiative. Christina is also the founder and CEO of Research Schools International, which carries out research and professional development projects to promote character skills and flourishing in schools around the world. Prior to these roles, Christina was a faculty member at Harvard Graduate School of Education. In addition, she worked in multilateral diplomacy and international policymaking at the OECD Center for Educational Research and Innovation and at UNICEF's Early Childhood Development Unit. Christina completed her doctorate and master's at Harvard in Education, Neuroscience, and Child Development, and her bachelor's at Swarthmore in Neuroscience and Education. Christina, I am thrilled to have you on the podcast. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here as well.
Wonderful. Well, I always ask the same question to everyone. What is your definition of happiness?
So I have to answer kind of formally from my program of the Human Flourishing program at Harvard, but also because I really have embraced this perspective, which is we talk about flourishing, which is holistic well-being. So it includes happiness, but it also includes the dimensions of character, social relationships, physical and mental health, etc. So it's kind of a broad index of overall well-being. And this is because, for example, can you be happy without having good character? We would say no. And so I think that it's important to, when we think about happiness, think about it in that broad sense. We also talk a lot about how we don't flourish on our own. We flourish in community and in our shared planet. So flourishing is also an individual trait, but also a societal, even broader than societal concept, ultimately.
Awesome. I should mention here that Christina is commuting because that's what we do when we live in the Boston area. We commute and then we commute some more. So, well, do you think that definition, yeah, spot on, right? All research-based. Is that how you see it personally?
Yes, I definitely do. I agree with that. I feel that when we think about happiness, we really should be thinking about this kind of broader view of happiness. Not just sort of feeling good all the time. I don't even think that would be a healthy human experience, right? It's healthy for humans on a broad range of emotions and experiences. And so for me, it makes a lot of sense that it's broader. Another aspect of our flourishing measure is meaning and purpose. So some of the things that give us meaning and purpose don't always make us happy in the kind of sense that we might think about it narrowly. And so I do think it's important to kind of think of happiness holistically, more toward a flourishing concept.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because I mean, like I love my job, it gives me purpose, but there are many aspects of it I do not like. That doesn't mean I'm not happy, right? So that moment to moment, you like that type of thing. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and like parenting is another good example. In the US, we know on average that parenting reduces happiness, but it increases meaning. So yeah, I would say that parenting definitely contributes to my happiness overall. But does it always make me have more happy feelings? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, uh, what about personally? I ask people a lot this question. Can you describe a moment when you felt truly happy?
so I'm truly happy when I'm with my loved ones. And it's not surprising because that's also what we find in research that the number one predictor of our happiness is our social bonds. So much more than anything else, the more and more that I learn about this field, the more convinced I become that the real key to happiness is having great social relationships, meaning social relationships that are meaningful, fulfilling, loving. Um, and so, yeah, all of my happiest moments have been with loved ones.
This this
Yeah,
comes up again and again, that relationships are so key, right? That Harvard study, right? Do you want to talk about that? The one that found that?
sure. Yeah, there was a Harvard study of development. It was a 100-year longitudinal study, and they looked at a whole bunch of determinants of happiness, but also health outcomes. And they found that the number one predictor was social relationships. So they were surprised to learn that even things like cardiovascular disease or Alzheimer's were predicted by the strength of social relationships.
Mm. Well, the thing, in some ways, that makes me feel hopeful, right? That we have like actions we can take, perhaps, to increase our happiness. But on the other hand, it also makes me, it's also sort of nerve-wracking because it's really hard to, it seems, to build relationships the older you get as an adult, especially if you move, like I have, and move to new communities. But I can understand when you're younger, it can be a little easier to nurture those. But what do we do when we're older, especially since so much we're so isolated, it seems, as people?
Yeah, I see this as a societal issue, really. I think that our society in particular is pretty atomized, kind of people living their separate lives, and doesn't have to be that way. It hasn't been that way in human history. It isn't that way in other cultures, some other cultures. And so, um, yeah, I think it's a challenge for us in America. And in terms of how to build the community, I think it starts with prioritizing it. So I also think American society is overly focused on productivity. And it's just kind of a given in this society that that's the point in a lot of circles. And I really want us to challenge that because I don't know what makes that the point, right? If you're producing a lot of things, but you're not flourishing, is that a worthwhile way to spend your time? I don't know. And so I think part of it is prioritizing it, recognizing that your relationships are important and need to be prioritized even above work, in my opinion. And I think also then following through on that and really making time and space for those connections.
Yeah, and especially in the US, flourishing, when you ask people, seems to be connected to productivity. How much did you accomplish at work, or how much money do you make, rather than the things that actually promote human flourishing, which aren't really directly connected to those, as you pointed out, but it's much more holistic. So yeah, it's going to take a culture shift, but also individually, we have to think of it that way too, right? Um, what is it that we need to flourish? And productivity can't be the only thing, um, without a doubt.
Of course, we need productivity to an extent, right? It's an enabler, but um, it's not sufficient, certainly.
So tell me about, because your work is so fascinating, thinking about children and development and how setting them up for flourishing. So what are some things that you've really found that are unique or interesting that you talk about in your talks around the world?
Sure. So I talk a lot about kind of research-based practices to promote flourishing. And so I can tell you a bit about that if that seems like
Yeah, that sounds great.
okay. Um, so the first one is what we were just talking about. So anything that supports social connection um, is definitely going to promote your flourishing. And so that's one that again, like can't be overstated really. Um, Another that there's good amount of research in is initiatives. Well, most of my work is in children in schools and like character skill initiatives and programs. So developing skills like kindness, gratitude, empathy. We know that that also promotes our flourishing, which makes sense because again, it enables social connections to be stronger. Um, and so that's another practice that we talk a lot about. Volunteering as well. Again, it's quite surprising some of the research, like volunteering can actually improve your cardiovascular health,
Mhm.
um, along with your mental health and character skills and other things. So that's quite interesting. Practicing again these like character skills. So for example, gratitude is like a very easy one, um, where we found that even, for example, in one study, people wrote down what went well for a week at the end of the day and then did nothing else. And even 6 months later, they were less likely to be depressed,
Hmm.
which is really interesting. So it's like you can do this small shift and actually have an impact. So that one's a great one that anyone can try like today. Another, probably unsurprisingly, is physical education, music and the arts, playfulness and humor is one of my favorites. When we study this in school, we find that that actually has one of the biggest impacts on the students flourishing is like how much are they getting a chance to laugh with their friends and their teachers. So that was interesting, even more so than some other things like physical education. Another is connecting with nature, which kind of circles back to what I touched on at the beginning. I think we can be quite disconnected from the whole, and reconnecting with nature and with our place in the world can also help us flourish.
All these things that you said, I mean, yes, I could see how they could be implemented in schools, but every last one of them, I feel like adults need those too. Every last one of
Absolutely.
those. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Those are kind of core universals, I would say, across ages, across cultures that, do really support us as people.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the simple like gratitude practice, it is harder to do as you get older, but if you make it sort of a habit, then it can like short circuit that negativity spiral that we all have naturally. Yeah. So I love that.
Yes. And you can do it anywhere. It can be, on your commute or when you're washing dishes. Like you don't need to have a special extra time to do it because I know we're all so busy. Um, you can just make a habit of asking yourself, what am I feeling grateful for today?
And sometimes in my yoga classes, because often we'll, you know, sort of call on that, ask our students to think of something they're grateful for. And for me, sometimes it's hard because I'm a grump, okay? I have always been grump. So sometimes it'll be something like peanut butter. It's really good. Right? It doesn't have to be like all deep, right? I'm like, I really like peanut butter. I really like that lamp I bought. Like
But that's great. It can be anything, really. And noticing that and, noticing how it
100%.
makes you feel to think about it.
Yeah. So
So,
tell me how you got into this line of work.
mm. So I've always been really passionate about working with children and I suppose I started with that. and kind of discovered the idea of using education to create more caring societies. So not just to educate for kind of math or reading, but also to educate for social emotional skills. And I found that really exciting and compelling because I really do think it's a powerful lever for societal change. Um, and so, yeah, I just became really passionate about that, about education for character, and got into that space and have been doing it ever since, and just as passionate today as on day one. So it's great. I'm very lucky I sort of discovered that.
Well, and I think now, with AI, that's exactly where I feel schools all throughout higher ed, all of them will be headed is character development because that's something that we can't AI, right? We can't like really train from that. So it's really, if we're thinking about what's left after that, the skills, it's those enduring skills of how to, be empathetic, get along with other people, um, flourish. And it's not intuitive.
Yes, it's interesting you say that. There's a project at the OECD looking at education for flourishing, and it touches on exactly that. Now that AI is taking over many of the skills that we used to take care of, like what are the uniquely human skills? And one of the skills that they propose is ethical decision making, um, as one of those. Although sometimes I wonder how good humans are at that, considering that we're kind of destroying the planet that we live
Yeah,
on and
yeah.
letting children die of curable diseases and all of these things. But yeah, we're doing our best, I guess. Um, sometimes I wonder if it
Well,
might be
just
good.
it shows that we need that education more than we've been giving to people.
True.
I mean, that's
Absolutely.
to me, it's like, okay, there's a problem here. And to
Yes.
know ethical, like ethics, you have to also have the empathy. You have to develop those skills because you can't have ethics without empathy. It doesn't work. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Empathy is so important.
yeah, so developing all those things you were just talking about that are key to human flourishing are also key to what it means to live in a world under AI. We have to develop those skills and we have to um, work at them like muscles, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And that's really clear that they are developed over time through experience and learning. So I think in the past there was some debate about is it nature or is it nurture? We know now unequivocally that there are genetic and environmental influences on all of these skills. And so they can be developed over time, and they are developed over time, which I think is important to realize. Like you need to practice them in order to develop them.
I really am interested in that volunteering is one of the main skills too. What my son, who is a junior, his school in Arkansas just implemented last year where they have to do so many volunteer hours to graduate. It's a statewide initiative. I was like, that's interesting. And it was unexpected. And I'm really glad to see that the research shows it helps a lot. Um, we we often see volunteering, die off for most of our adult life until people retire and then they feel like they have time. But what it seems to be saying is that that's something we need to do throughout our lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that it does help you flourish. So it's one of the things you can do.
Mhm. How long has the Human Flourishing Program been in existence?
I think about 7 years or we're coming up on our 10th year actually, because we just spoke
Mhm.
about having a 10-year celebration. So yeah, coming up on our 10th year.
Is
Um,
it a lot of people within that program? Like, is a lot of people work there?
there's about 20 staff members. It's really interesting because it's part of what we did to come up with the flourishing concept was integrating the social sciences and the humanities, like wisdom from both. And so it's a really interesting interdisciplinary team. There's people from school of public health, there's people from philosophy, from divinity, from all across the university. So I lead the education work, but my colleagues are also studying all kinds of other fascinating things. So it's a really interesting team.
Cool. What are some of the things they're finding? If just like spit off the top of your head, I'm just gonna pretend like you're an encyclopedia and I'm just picking at you.
Well, we just um, did a global flourishing study, which some of you may have seen in the news, which was studying the determinants of flourishing in half, like a representative sample of half the world's population, which is a massive study and lots of interesting insights there. So you can look that up to learn more about it. That was led by my colleague, Dr. Tyler Vanderweel, and some other partners as well. But he was the lead at the Flourishing program. And yeah, I mean, one really interesting insight to me was that some of the more wealthy countries were not necessarily scoring as high on some of the dimensions as some of the middle income countries. Um, so again, to link back to that productivity piece we were talking about, I think that, of course, it's good to be productive, but also there can be a tipping point where it's at what cost. And so, yeah, just kind of reorienting ourselves, I think, to what really is truly important is a good thing to be reflective of at this time point, I think.
Well, that sort of meshes with the happiness index that comes out every year. Um, where what is it like? Especially the Scandinavian countries usually rank really, really high, and they're not necessarily the wealthiest, right? Um, but they have the best standard of living, really. It seems to be based on the criteria. So yeah, that would mesh with that, right?
Yeah, we even found countries like Indonesia and Mexico were scoring quite high, which,
Really?
yeah, which could likely relate to, again, to the social connection piece.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Oh, I'm excited. I'll have to look more into that. What about you? What are you working on right now?
So we're launching a new project called Flourishing Schools, where we're looking at kind of helping schools measure and track their students' character skills and flourishing over time. So the idea is that they'll see where they're at, where their strengths are, where their areas for growth are. And then my organization, which you mentioned, Research Schools International, will give some support to the schools and helping them dig into the areas for growth and improve their practice on the ground, and then measure again in these kind of cycles of research and professional development. The idea is to help schools really take flourishing seriously as an outcome of interest. So, right, if we're not measuring it, we can't really orient toward it. So this is offering like a new approach. Right now there's lots of measurements of academic skills, but um, not so many of student well-being and character. So that we're trying to offer that as a kind of intervention to improve practice in those ways and help
I
the
love
schools
that.
orient toward it. Yeah, yeah. So that's one. And then the other, as you mentioned, is launching this new evidence-based parenting initiative. So it's to look at what do we know from the interdisciplinary science of child development and parenting that can help us in our day-to-day parenting practices. So kind of synthesizing across the knowledge and giving parents in the real world everyday strategies that they can use and apply that are evidence based.
Those are both amazing. I really like the idea that y- of measuring well-being, student well-being in schools, because if they're not doing well academically, it usually relates to the other thing. They're not doing well socially, emotionally, all those different things. They're not flourishing. So I like that score as a complement to what's going on academically. That's really cool. So glad you're
Absolutely.
doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's sometimes a misconception that there's kind of a trade off where we can either be really rigorous or we can be really sweet and soft to our kids. And like actually what we find in the research is that they're mutually reinforcing. So the better that students are doing academically, the more they tend to be flourishing, the better that we're supporting their well-being, the better they tend to do academically. So it's really not a trade-off. It's actually a mutually reinforcing system where you need to be addressing the whole child in order to, even if your only goal, which I hope it isn't, but was to get like just academic scores, you still need to be nurturing the well-being of the children.
And honestly, who cares if we have students who can, kids who can do well academically if they're big jerks, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. This is something I argue a lot. Like, if we don't have an ethical compass, we don't even want an educated population without an ethical compass. We've seen some examples of that in history, and it doesn't lead to very good places. So yeah, we definitely want to be making sure we're developing those character skills alongside the other skills.
Yeah, I absolutely adore this. It's like everything you're saying. I'm like, yes, please. This is exactly what we need to do, and we need to do it in like all aspects of our society. Like we really need this sort of mentality that we have to develop these skills, and even within your workplace, you'd be productive, and you're more productive if you are, holistically flourishing. So how can we nurture that within workplaces too? Yeah.
Absolutely. And some of my colleagues work on well-being in workplaces, and that is what, again, they find like probably unsurprisingly, the well-being of the workers is correlated with the productivity as well.
Yeah, when that that's fantastic, fantastic stuff. Now, if you had, I know it's a huge project, that the parenting piece, right? Where there's like all sorts of things you could do. But I know the people be like, give me some takeaways. Give me like two things I could do to help my kids. Help.
Sure, sure. So we we have like three pillars of parenting that we talk about, which are based on kind of a systematic review of research around the world and parenting. And those pillars are warmth, structure, and autonomy support. So support of the autonomy of the child. And so there's different like ways that we can accomplish those, but you really want to kind of weave those three together in your parenting. So with warmth, for example, we talk about how to create like a secure attachment with your child by being responsive and consistent in your interactions with them. And loving and physical affection is really good for children. Um, with structure, it's about having clear boundaries. Um, and schedules and expectations and that sort of thing. And then with supporting their autonomy, it's really letting them, develop their own independent selves and not being kind of um, overly pushy, for lack of a better word, on what
Helicoptering.
they're
Don't
doing. Yeah,
helicopter.
exactly. Helicoptering. Yeah. And so kind of there are some strategies that kind of blend those together. So as an example, um, let's say your child doesn't want to do something, they don't want to leave the playground, for example. What you want to do is basically like empathize and give them the warmth, but also hold a clear boundary. So it's like, oh, I totally get it. You were having so much fun playing and I have to leave. What a bummer. But it's time to go home for dinner. So we're going to leave now. And so that's kind of like the sweet spot where you want to be, is both offering the warmth and the empathy and holding the firm boundary. And I think like that's a really easy takeaway for a lot of parents, like, because then they kind of know, oh, if I'm doing that, that's what's best for my child's development, and they won't get distracted when their child, like, if your child reacts with a temper tantrum, fine, it doesn't matter. Like, that's their reaction, right? Like, so it's just, that you're doing what's good for them by doing that. So you can feel kind of confident in that strategy, regardless of what happens after. So I think parents find that like to be a really powerful takeaway. I use it all the time in my own parenting as well. And just being careful not to invalidate. I think that's a really key piece as well. So, you don't say like, oh, come on, it's not a big deal. Like, we'll be back tomorrow anyway. You don't try to cheer them up. Well, when we get home, I'll give you ice cream. You just acknowledge and make space for the feelings that exist, but also, keep, like, as Dr. Becky says, stay the sturdy leader who kind of like keeps keeps you moving in the direction you're going to.
It sounds so easy, but as a parent, you get so tired. It's so
Yeah.
hard to be level-headed. I mean, it's so hard to like, I am going to remember all these things because you're like, if this child does this one more time, I swear to God. So, what are some strategies for like chilling so you don't lose your mind at your kids?
Yeah, I think that that's another really important piece is like attending to your own emotional well-being so that you can be there and present and responsive to your children. So I'm writing a book on evidence-based parenting, and one of the principles is self-care is care for your child. In the sense that when you take care of yourself, you can show up as your best self for your child. And also, you're modeling that self care matters. So when your child finds themselves in a situation where, it's overwhelming, they're stressed, they'll say, it's okay for me to take a moment out and take care of myself because that's what I saw my parents do. So in both those sentences, I truly believe that self-care is care for your child. And actually your yoga class is one of my self-care routines that I found incredibly helpful in like developing, cultivating kind of a calm space that you can return to. And it doesn't have to be yoga, it's whatever it is for that parent, but really taking care of themselves so that they have that kind of space in themselves to be responsive, not reactive to the child. And of course, all of us will sometimes react. And then that's when you need to practice self compassion of, hey, we're all learning and making mistakes. And that's also good for your children because another key thing is to model how to be a good human, which is like you will make mistakes. And what do you do when you make mistakes? Then you can, for example, apologize and, explain what happened, what you hope to do better next time, and that kind of modeling for the child is important too. So yeah, I think parents are way too hard on themselves. They need to first of all take better care of themselves, and second of all, really like accept that they aren't going to be perfect and that nobody expects them to. And even if they were, that would be not good for their child because then what would their child do when they made a mistake? They wouldn't know what to do.
100%. And I think about that quite a bit. That what you just described, like what would you want your kid to do? And that's what you should do. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like self-care. For me, like taking a, job across the country, things like that. The ultimate factor for me that I ask myself when making these hard things is what would I want my child to do in this situation? And
Yeah.
and what because I know by making that decision I will model what I would hope they would do. That doesn't mean they'll do it, but what I'd hope because I feel like it would be the best. And if it would be the best for my kid, then it should be the best for me. Um, so I really like that
Yes.
concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know from research that children tend to do what their parents do, not what their parents say to do. So really that modeling piece is so important. And I think it's a good self-check for yourself too, because we're often very kind to our children and maybe less so to ourselves. So it's a good way, good decision-making process for you too, to think, what would I want for my child? Would I want this for my child? And if not, then maybe it's not the right fit for you either, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I know Christina from my yoga class, which is one of the best things about living in this area. Like I just go teach in my class, and then I find out after, oh, oh, she's a researcher at the Human Flourishing Institute in Harvard. And that's like a crazy thing about living in this area. So yeah, it's really cool how we can connect to people and through little things like yoga. There's no place like Boston. There's no place like it.
Except
It's
the
crazy town.
winters. Except the winters. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
they suck. But
Horrible. Rest of
but
the
we'll
year
take
is
care of ourselves,
wonderful.
right? Fires. What's
Yes.
that?
The rest of the year is wonderful though.
Oh, right
And
now
you're
we're in
right.
prime time. Fall. This
Yeah,
is
it's so
this is our
beautiful.
glory time. It's the best. So till we head into the winter, right? Forever. So, what are some habits that you personally do other than yoga to maintain your sort of flourishing?
Sure, yeah, yoga is a big one. And I also exercise every day, even though I'm super busy. I make time for that because I find it's just really good for your mood, good for your sleep. There's kind of this really positive knock-on effect um, in your life. Social piece that we talked about, like I really do prioritize time with my children, time with my friends, time with my family, loved ones. I try to block out times when, it's kind of like just with them, the phone's away, um, that kind of thing, because like my work is so busy, it could very easily take over my whole life. So I really need to like create spaces for that. And I like on my work to-do list at the top, I have a little thing called life priorities, and it has a list of my life priorities. So every day when I look at my work to-do list, I'm like, am I also keeping with my life priorities? To be sure, help myself not fall out of balance, or not fall out of balance as often, at least. And so that's something I'm really conscious of. Um, I spend a good amount of time in nature. Really love being in nature and connected to that, like kind of larger whole that we're all a part of. So that's something I do as well. And also I would say playfulness. Like in my personal life, I bring quite a lot of playfulness to whatever situation is happening. And I think that kind of helps everything. Just, yeah, just be more fun. So like,
100%. I'm all for that.
yeah, like with parenting, as we're talking about, like if you can kind of laugh at these absurd situations, they become not so annoying, if it's like, can you put on your shoes? And it's like, oh, it's been 40 minutes and we've been still talking about the shoes. Like if you can just like laugh at the absurdity of that, it's sort of like, yeah, it just changes the dynamic, I think. So I, yeah, bring a lot of playfulness to parenting and work. And I work with one of my best friends in my organization, so that's a lot of fun. We're sort of always laughing as we do things, which is nice. And so yeah, I try to bring that sort of light spirit, I guess, to everyday life. And just
I, I
part of,
I agree completely because the older I get too, the more I'm like lean into that part, the light spirit, because this sort of even if the work is really heavy, like having yourself be heavy within that work, your mental space, it doesn't help. Right? You're not going to do as good work, and it's not as
yes,
fun.
yes. And I think part of it is really keeping perspective. Like we all have been around like everything's so important, but I don't know, I'm always thinking like, well, we're just like a speck in the universe, So like I just like think of that, and then I'm like, we might as well have some fun while we're here. I mean, I don't want to be too existential, but
It's true.
it does help me sort of back away from the kind of like very serious nature of a lot of people, for example,
Well,
at
I think
Harvard.
too, nobody should take themselves too seriously.
Mm, hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I find when I'm taking myself too seriously, then I need to be as silly as possible.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's like part of self-acceptance, right? Is being able to be like, oh yeah, it's great and funny that I'm not perfect and I have all these things or whatever. So,
100%. Well, how do you feel about social media?
I'm pretty anti-social media, to be honest. You might be familiar with like the anxious generation. The author of that is one of our collaborators, and the more I learn about it, the more concerned I become for youth. Because my main concern isn't doing it itself. My main concern is like the opportunity cost of actual in-person social connection. Um,
Mm,
and so it's like, I don't know. I just feel like all these kids are just staring into screens and they're missing, like, as we talked about at the beginning, the key ingredient that gives our life meaning and makes our life rich and brings us happiness. And, it's really sad if you look at the stats, like, they're way less socially connected. And I think that's one of the reasons. So, yeah, I would recommend staying away from it basically as much as you can. Um, and also, like, age of onset for the child matters too. So getting them started as late as you can.
yeah, I think that's key too. Though a lot it seems that they create sort of different levels of social community. I know my kids spend a lot of time on Discord and like every night, like together in groups talking. And I mean, in some ways, that is, develops social connections. It's not the same as in person, but there are some skills. So maybe there's like a middle road.
Yeah, and there's certainly some social benefits and some benefits, but mostly the research shows the more kids use it, the lower their well-being on average across a range of dimensions. So I don't know. It probably depends on the child too, right? Like I'm sure there's individual differences within that, hidden within that average. Like maybe if a child's really shy in person, maybe it actually gives them more social connection because they feel more free in that sense. I don't know. I'm speculating there, but
Sounds good to me.
yeah, it's a possibility. But but in general, like as a if you're kind of looking for general guidance as a parent, I would say try to limit it.
So, what advice would you give someone who's struggling to sort of flourish?
I would say like really trying to get together with people, even if it feels hard, right? Just kind of like
Mhm.
getting yourself to do it anyway. Because I think it's probably the most important piece of this as we've been talking about. Um, so yeah, which is
Yeah.
maybe easier said than done for a lot of people, but I think really pushing yourself to do that. It's interesting in the UK there's a new trend of social prescribing, which is like prescribing um like for example volunteering or meeting a friend or something like when people are coming in for let's say depression that they actually like prescribe like an hour of volunteering a week or something like that. And there's been some pretty interesting results showing effectiveness of this social prescribing. Um,
Wow, I love
so
that.
yeah, it's really interesting. And in my opinion, it's a better approach than kind of just popping more pills, you know.
Yeah.
So it tends to be
It
the negative
is. It also
approach.
it's more in your control, right? Which is
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, yeah.
I love that. Well, we only have two more questions. We're coming to the end already. So I could talk to you all day because you know all the things, and I'm just like, keep telling me more. I'm getting this, free class, and I'm not paying a dime. I'm loving it. So first is one of your favorite songs, so we can put on the playlist.
Oh, um, oh gosh.
This is
Um,
usually the hardest question.
I don't know. There's so many good ones to choose from.
You can
Um,
have up to two.
let's see. Depends on the mood. If I'm sort of in a calm mood, I like the Jack Johnson kind of thing. Um,
Mhm.
if I'm in a more like excited mood, then maybe like, let's see, what's one of my go-tos with the kids? Mm, we like Girl on Fire. That's a good one.
That is a good one. What
Mhm.
about for Jack Johnson? What's a favorite Jack Johnson? Like banana pancakes or?
Yeah, Banana Pancakes is a great one. We listen to that on Sunday mornings sometimes.
I love it. All right, last question. What are some final thoughts you would have on happiness?
Um, I guess I would say like, well, talking to an American audience, I would say like you deserve to prioritize your happiness, which I
Mhm.
don't think our society tells us. I think our society tells us to just produce, produce, produce. And I think like, you really do deserve to prioritize your own happiness. And actually when you do that, you can bring more to others as well, as we talked about with self-care and self-care is care for your children. It's also care for the other people in your life as well, right?
Mhm.
So I think really like giving ourselves permission to prioritize our happiness and to just enjoy, just enjoy life. I had the opportunity to live in Paris when I was in my 20s, and that was really one of my big takeaways from that culture is I was like, oh, enjoyment is important. Like it's not a nice to have after. It's like that's actually important. Like that's a key aspect of what we're trying to do here. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's been like a really wonderful little nugget of wisdom that I took from that culture that I think is I would want to share too. Like you deserve to be happy and you should make enjoyment important in your life.
I love that. You're talking to you is just like an absolute dream come true for me.
Aw.
Because
That's
the work you
sweet.
do matters so much, and I love it. I love it so. I'm like, oh my gosh, nerding out over here. So I can't thank you enough for taking this time. I know you're incredibly busy, but thank you. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
of course. Thank you for everything you do for us in yoga and help us maintain our well-being too. It's amazing. It really is. It's a really deep class.
Oh, thank you. Well, I hope to see you there soon. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, especially Dr. Hinton. I appreciate you. We all do. Thank you for your research.
You're very welcome. Take care. Bye.
Bye.